Hey guys, this is Jay Calderon with Jay Unboxing here, giving you my immediate reaction to the unification bout between Josh Taylor and Jose Ramirez that took place in Las Vegas, Nevada, airing live on ESPN. Now, for a brief summary of the bout, it was a pretty back and forth in the first maybe 5 or 6 rounds. You had both guys having some success. I think Taylor probably got off to a little bit of a faster start, but in the 3rd or 4th rounds, Ramirez was coming on and was beginning to get a little more brave and a little more into the fight. Unfortunately for the Mexican-American, that was knocked out of him when a pullback left cross dropped him in one of those middle rounds, ultimately leaving him pretty stunned, but able to continue, of course. Then as the fight progressed, they were inside on a clinch, and Ramirez pulled back thinking that Taylor wasn't going to throw anything as they pulled back, but Taylor had every right and every intention to throw a perfectly executed uppercut that ultimately dropped the Mexican-American much harder than the first drop did. He was pretty hurt, his head snapped back, hit the canvas, and it really knocked most of the fight out of him for the remainder of the bout. Ultimately, Ramirez had moments and maybe even won, maybe say 2 out of the last 3 rounds of the fight. But at that point, the Scotsman was mostly coasting, knowing that he probably had it in the bag. His mix of power shots as well as being able to ultimately outskill his counterpart led to him having a pretty comfortable decision win. Scores were across the board 114-112, which means that they were not giving Taylor any breaks in there. He pretty much needed knockdowns in order to basically get the rounds pretty clearly. I thought it was a little wider than that. I was watching it live, so I'm not going to give so much of emphasis on the score itself, but ultimately I thought he did enough to win, and pretty convincingly, which, if you guys didn't know, was the prediction I laid down before the bout took place. You can, of course, check that out as well. Now, both fighters obviously gave it their all, and I think Ramirez tried as much as he could, especially valiantly in that 11th and 12th round when he was pushing forward and trying to land that shot that could ultimately change things for him, but it just wasn't meant to be. Taylor was just pinpoint on tonight. Even when he, in the 3rd and 4th round, got hit with some pretty solid body shots that, could have really deterred him, he just had a look in his eyes that this is something I'm just going to have to overcome. It's not going to stop me. It's just a new obstacle. And after the fight, even after he had won, after he expected to win, after he bossed his man in the ring and really should have won the fight, you see him kind of raised up by his team and just yelling, "Who's the man? I'm the man." It's just one of those situations where you look at it and think, this guy is on another level competitive. He gets ramped up before the fights and kind of turns some people off because, again, he's not the most courteous. He's not trying to make friends. He is a mean, awful, kind of nasty guy. He's not particularly pleasant. He also, by the way, to his credit, doesn't suggest that he is or that he should be. Some people need this to get it out of him, and I think he's one of those kind of guys, obviously, and it works because he is just an uber competitive type. You can tell that nothing made him happier than winning. I don't even know if the first thought in his mind, I'm sure, might have had something to do with unifying all 4 major belts as well as the Ring Magazine World Championship at 140 pounds. Might also be that he's the 6th man in history to have ever done that. Might also be that he might have moved himself up the pound-for-pound list as well as the greatest Scotsman who's ever lived in terms of boxers list as well. The point is, I don't know if that's the first thought that came to his mind. I think his first thought was, people doubted that I could do this. Maybe not everyone, but enough, and I proved them wrong. I think that's just the type of person that he is. Interesting to see what he's going to do going forward. He's a fairly tall junior welterweight, but I don't know if he needs to make a move up to welterweight automatically. He's not a particularly big puncher, but it is a move that if, the right options are there and it's attractive for him, it's certainly something he could do. He also, of course, could meet Teofimo Lopez if he decides to move up to 140 pounds after his mandatory defense against George Kambosos later on. So he has some options, certainly, and he's, undefeated in less than 20 fights. To imagine what this young man's gotten done. Total unification. Remained undefeated, had domestic rivals, won domestic championships, won world championships, won the Ring Magazine championships, won a massive tournament, and then has come over to America fight against his toughest, at least on paper, certainly, opponent to date, and look what he does. He unifies the entire division. That's what you can do when you actually believe in yourself, when your team believes in you, and you actually are matched the right way to ensure that you're ready for these levels and these progressions like Taylor has been. It's a really remarkable run for him and certainly puts him in position for Fighter of the Year and definitely allows for him to move up pound-for-pound lists if that's the sort of thing that you care about. Now, as it pertains to Ramirez, obviously he has a little bit of rebuilding struggling to do some things that he's going to have to kind of look at in terms of, what he wants to do for his next move. I would suggest he probably tries to stay at 140 pounds, maybe could pick up a couple of interesting fights there before moving up to 147 pounds, because if he's getting dropped by Josh Taylor, who's not the most concussive fighter, a move up is probably not the greatest thing for him just yet, because I haven't heard really too much about Ramirez struggling to make weight, where maybe he's weight drained, and as he moves up, he'll be a lot more, available to taking those kinds of shots and dealing with them better. That doesn't seem to be the case. Every fighter, of course, tends to have a little bit of an issue making weight, and that's why they get a bit ornery towards the fight, but he doesn't have that kind of tale of he barely makes weight every single fight and this might be his last one at the weight. He, for the most part, seems to make weight, relatively speaking, comfortably. So the idea that he moves up to 147 now just because of a loss could, to me, spell trouble for him if he does, end up eating some of those big shots. And quite frankly, there are not a lot of, once you get to the top of 147 pounds, there are not a lot of soft touches. Something that could possibly be a big money fight or a decent fight for him is a fight with Regis Prograis is a possibility, but at the same time, it's a risk for both of them. Perhaps Taylor would maybe drop a title just due to the mandatory obligations that are there. He's at least done it, and he might have other plans anyway. They might be able to fight for a mandatory position and or a potentially vacant title, so that might entice both of them to do that, and that'd be an interesting fight. But for the most part, it's really difficult to say because, again, he does seem a fighter who now has been beaten by the guy that he probably loses to more often than not, and he happens to have all the gold in his division, but he's probably not physically ready for the next division up. So, in any event, let me know what you guys think both of them will do down in the comments section below. Would love to hear from you there. Please be sure to like, comment, follow, subscribe, all that great stuff as well. Would appreciate a follow on Twitter at jcalderon_JOB. You can also email me at junboxing@gmail.com. And of course, be sure to visit junboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, so on and so forth. And as always, until next time.